Welcome! We're diving into that final, often kind of mysterious step in making music, audio mastering. We're going to pull back the curtain on how a great mix transforms into a professional-sounding track that's ready to be heard anywhere and everywhere. Okay, let's start with a scene I bet a lot of you know all too well. You've just finished a mix, you've poured your heart into it, it sounds clean, the performance is killer, so you export it, you take it to your car for that all-important test listen. And then a track by your favorite artist comes on the radio, and bam. Suddenly, your song just feels like it's missing something, right? Does any of this ring a bell? Maybe your track isn't loud enough, it sounds kind of wimpy next to other songs, or it sounds a bit dull, it just doesn't have that high-end sparkle. Maybe the bass isn't hitting you in the chest like it should. You try just cranking the main volume, but that doesn't fix it, it just makes the problems louder, not better. This is exactly where so many of us get stuck. Yeah, see, the fix for these issues isn't as simple as a volume knob. It's a whole dedicated process, equal parts art and science, that bridges that final gap between your mix and a pro-level commercial release. So what is mastering, really? Well, at its core, it's all about taking that final mix of yours and getting it ready for the world. You can think of it as the final quality control, that last coat of polish that makes sure your music sounds absolutely fantastic no matter where people are listening. So one of the biggest goals of mastering, and probably the one people notice first, is getting that quote-unquote commercial sound. And a huge part of that is all about making the track competitively loud. And here's a massive frustration for so many artists. You get your song on a playlist, and when it comes on right after a track from a huge artist, someone has to reach over and turn the volume up. Your track just doesn't have that same punch, that same perceived impact. So how do engineers solve this? Well, they use specialized tools, things like limiters or loudness maximizers. These things are really clever. They find the absolute loudest, quickest peaks in a song, like a big snare hit, and they transparently turn just those peaks down. That's what that gain reduction meter is showing. And by doing that, they create more room, allowing the overall level of the entire track to be brought up without any of that nasty digital distortion. The goal is simple: more perceived volume. But here's the crucial thing. It's not just about making it louder. When a mastering engineer does this right, the process adds presence, it adds power, it adds punch. It makes your song feel more energetic and helps it stand shoulder to shoulder with other big releases. Okay, let's talk about the second major goal of mastering. This one is just as critical, especially if you're putting together a whole album or an EP. And it's all about one word: consistency. I want you to think about the last time you listened to a truly great album, from start to finish. Did you ever find yourself reaching for the volume knob between songs? I'm guessing not. That quiet, intimate ballad just flowed perfectly into that loud, epic rock song. Well, guess what? That is not an accident. That is the art of mastering an album. The engineer listens to every single track, in order, and makes these tiny, subtle tweaks to the volume and the EQ of each one. The goal isn't to make them all sound the same, not at all. It's to make them sound like they belong together, like they're all part of one cohesive artistic statement. And the end result is a smooth, uninterrupted journey for the listener. But, this quest to make every single track powerful and loud has created a bit of a problem over the years. This constant push for competitive loudness sparked a huge debate, one that's been raging for decades, really. It's often called the loudness war, because as it turns out, making something louder almost always comes at a price. So this is the fundamental trade-off. On one hand, making your track really loud helps it compete. And our brains are funny. We tend to think louder music sounds better or more exciting. But the cost of that loudness is a loss of dynamics, the difference between the quiet parts and the loud parts. On the other hand, if you keep those dynamics, you get more emotional range, but your song might get lost in a playlist. This quote just nails it. Dynamics are the emotional highs and lows. When you squash a track to make it super loud, that whisper becomes almost as loud as the scream. Now, what's really interesting is that streaming services are kind of fighting back against this. They use something called loudness normalization, which automatically turns down songs that are too loud, leveling the playing field and bringing the focus back to dynamics. And if you ever need proof that loudest doesn't mean best, this is it. This album is a complete masterpiece of dynamic range. Its power comes from those huge shifts, from the quiet atmospheric moments to the massive soaring guitar solos, All of that would be lost if it were mastered to today's super loud standards. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? What's the main thing to remember about mastering? This is probably the most important rule of all. Mastering can't fix a bad mix. It's not magic. It can't rebalance your drums or fix a bad vocal take. It's there to enhance what's already great, to take all your hard work and give it that final professional shine. And finally, let's not forget, mastering is also a deeply technical step. A good mastering engineer knows the exact specs needed for every format out there. Whether you're pressing to vinyl, encoding for streaming, or sending it off for broadcast, they make sure your music translates perfectly to every single system. And that really brings us to the final critical question that every single artist has to answer. In this constant balancing act between sheer volume and dynamic life, where do you fall? The answer to that question is what will ultimately define the character and the emotional impact of your music. There's no one right answer, only the one that's right for your art.